So I actually want to begin with a little word association exercise, and here's how it's going to work. I'm actually going to show you a picture, a photo, and I want you to tell me the first thing that kind of pops into your head. It's a word association thing, and so I'm going to tell you things that are associated with king, and then you tell me exactly what it is that goes along with it. And I want to hear from you. This is a kind of a participation thing, and so you need to talk back to me. Otherwise, I'm going to feel terrible with this. And on all of our locations, love to hear from you as well. So as you figure out what they are, then you tell me what it is. So if you see a picture and you see Simba, you think of Lion King. All right, we're off to a good start. So if you see a big angry gorilla, you think of King Kong. Okay, if you see a burger, a Whopper, you think of Burger King. So I need to tell you real quick, several years ago I was on a Burger King kick, and so probably, 2-3 times a week I would come out of my office and I would say to Shauna and Heidi, who just, their decks were close to mine, and I would say, I'm going to see the King. Do you need anything? Can I get anything for you? And so I'm very familiar with Burger King. All right, let's keep kind of moving here. If you're looking for a thriller to read, then you're probably going to read something from Stephen King. All right, Spielberg. No, we're not other choices here. All right. He's known for his interviews, and so Larry King, okay. When the change to the sports world, if you're thinking of this gentleman, he's known as LeBron King James, okay, good. Might get a little tougher as we go now. So this is B.B. King, known as the King of the Blues. And then this is going to be a tougher one. Nat King Cole, King of Jazz. And then finally we've got Elvis and King of Rock and Roll. I mistakenly said he was King of Pop, and I was very quickly corrected. He is King of Rock and Roll. Now, when it comes to kings, these are the kind of kings that we typically think about, because the truth is, most of us don't know a whole lot about kings. I mean, we know about kind of Harry and Meghan and William and Kate, but in America, we don't really understand kings, nor do we understand kingdoms. And I mean, think about it. What is a king supposed to do anyway, especially today? And so if and when Prince William ever does become king, what is he going to do anyway? And now, in ancient times, medieval times, the king was a figure of national pride. Oftentimes they were looked at as being superhuman, and people revered and feared kings alike, and because the king held ultimate power. He was subject to no other authority, and little could be done to question his authority, and that is until another stronger, more powerful king would actually come along. And when a king would sit on his throne, and I actually had them wheel this over from my office, it's my desk chair, but when a king would sit on his throne, it was his duty as king to protect the kingdom and dictate what should be done in that kingdom. And he was to keep the peace and administer justice. He was to uphold all the laws of the land and care for the poor. Bottom line, it was the job of the king to rule the kingdom. Bottom line, being a king was all about power. It was all about authority. Now, throughout history, there have been some good kings, but more often than not, there have been very poor kings, not so good kings. And while there were a few kings that were honorable and just did the right and fair and just thing, most kings have been selfish, cruel, and oppressive. And now, I tell you all this about kings because Easter is actually all about kings. Easter is all about a king, and the king of Easter was actually different than all other kings. And Easter's about a king of the nation of Israel. And for centuries, the people of Israel had waited for a king that would come and free them from injustice, free them from oppression and poverty. And for centuries, they had heard rumors that there was going to be a king coming that would finally raise Israel to its rightful place of prominence. And time again, prophets would actually foretell and say, there's coming a powerful king. And they would declare that this king is coming. The prophet Jeremiah actually said it this way. He said, "For the time is coming, says the Lord, when I will raise up a righteous descendant from the King David's line, and he will be a king who rules with wisdom, and he will do what is just and right throughout the land." The prophet Zechariah actually said, "Rejoice, O people of Zion. Shout in triumph, O people of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He's righteous and victorious. Yes, and he will be humble as well." And so throughout their history, The people of Israel actually had 42 different kings, but of these 42 kings, only 8 of them were considered to be good kings. And so, finding themselves oppressed and finding themselves under the heavy thumb of the Roman Empire, the people of Israel, they longed for this coming king, this promised king that they were waiting. And as they waited, they were expecting. They were watching for a king that would be born in a palace. They assumed to be surrounded by all types of wealth and luxury and comfort. They were expecting a king that would overthrow the Roman Empire. They were expecting a king that would make Israel a great nation. But what they got and what they actually were expecting were two very different things. They didn't get what they expected. No one expected that their king would be born in a stable and laid in a manger. Nobody expected that their king would be born into poverty to a young teenage mother. Before this king's birth, an angel actually showed up, spoke to Mary, the teenage mother of Jesus, this coming king, and the angel said to Mary, "Behold, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. He'll be very great and will be called Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end." Now, as this young king grew older, no one expected that their king would actually become friends with prostitutes. No one expected that this king would actually touch lepers, and nobody expected that he would love those that all of society rejected. And they never expected that this king would choose uneducated fishermen and a despised tax collector and a rebellious troublemakers to be his closest friends and confidants. No one ever expected their king would actually forgive a woman that was caught in the act of adultery when the law of the day actually said she should be stoned to death. And they never expected that the king of the Jews would ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. And those that were cheering him on the loudest were the outcast, the overlooked, and the oppressed. And no one expected that their king would actually stand trial for crimes that he did not commit. No one expected that their king would end up being beaten and whipped and scourged and stripped naked to be hung on a cross, sentenced to die a criminal's death. No one expected that their king would actually die a shameful death in front of people who were mocking him and spitting on him. And no one expected that their dead king would actually be buried in a borrowed grave. And above all else, no one expected that 3 days after Jesus died and was buried, when some of the women went to his grave just to check on the grave, no one expected them to find the stone would be rolled away. No one expected that the body of the king would be gone. No one expected that this king would rise from the dead and now sit at the right hand of God the Father. And this king, Jesus, he's like no other. Totally unexpected. This king is Jesus, and he's changed the course of all of human history. And this is the king who divided all of human history, AD and BC, or BC and AD. And rest assured, this king, Jesus, being alive, is not just wishful thinking. I mean, we know that Jesus rose from the dead. We know it because there were over 500 people who saw and interacted with Jesus after his death and resurrection. And some of those 500 eyewitnesses have become household names like Peter and James and John. And what that means is that Jesus truly is a king like no other. And so much so that Jesus is the only one that's ever been given the title of King of Kings and Lord of Lords by God himself, which means there's no one more powerful now, nor will there ever be anyone more powerful than Jesus. And so Easter's all about a king, but this king, it's different than all the other kings. This king named Jesus came, and he only had one purpose in mind when he came, and he came to serve his people. And what so often happens is somebody rises to power and they forget who it is that they came to serve in the first place. This king never forgot his people. And Jesus was very clear about the kind of king that he would be. He was very clear about who he actually came to serve. One day, people were complaining about the fact that Jesus was always hanging out with the wrong crowd. Apparently, they were complaining because they'd seen Jesus eating and drinking with a rough crowd. And so they were complaining to Jesus, and they actually said to Jesus, "Why do you eat and drink with such scum?" Scum, they called the people. And Jesus responded. He said, "Look, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I've come to call sinners to turn from their sins, not to spend my time with those who think they are already good enough. I didn't come to spend time with people who think they are good enough. You see, Easter is all about a king, but a different kind of king, a king who came to serve his people. People who are sick, people who are less than perfect. Possibly you. Somebody less than perfect. On another occasion, Jesus said his purpose as king is to actually give to his people what he said is life in all of its fullness. Meaning Jesus came to change lives to those who their experience in life was something less than perfect. And if your experience in life is less than perfect, then Jesus came for you. And what this means is Jesus actually came for those of us who are willing to admit that we need help. Jesus actually came for those of us that are willing to admit that we don't have life altogether. Jesus came for those of us that are less than perfect, and yet he said, those of you that are less than perfect, you can still live your lives to its fullest potential. Easter's all about a king. Easter's also about you, and it's about me. And Easter's all about how you and I are going to respond to this king. And so Easter actually raises a real important question. And the question is, how are you going to respond to Jesus? And how are you going to respond to this king who is like no other king in all of history? And the thing is, you do have some choices as to how you respond to Jesus. And one choice would be just to oppose Jesus as king. And many of us have made the choice to oppose Jesus. And the way you can tell that you've made the choice to actually oppose Jesus is if you find yourself saying things like this, where you say, you know what, I don't need Jesus. I'm doing fine on my own. Or I don't want anybody else telling me what to do. Or perhaps you haven't come right out and opposed Jesus. Instead, maybe you've taken a more subtle approach, and simply what you've done is you've just dismissed Jesus as king, and you know you've dismissed Jesus as king when you say things like this, where you say, you know what, I'm just not feeling Jesus right now. This Jesus thing, I'm not feeling it. Or you say, I'll get serious about Jesus later, but right now I've got other more important things to do. Or maybe you've actually told somebody else, maybe a friend, maybe a coworker, you said, you know, I think it's great that you have faith, but I'm not really a religious kind of person. Or perhaps you actually said, I did the church thing once, but I'm not really into that anymore. And so we can choose to oppose Jesus. We could choose just to dismiss him. But there is a third choice on how to respond to Jesus as king. And this third choice is actually to surrender to him. To surrender to him as king and bow down and just obey him. And can I tell you, this is probably the hardest choice of the three to make. And I can choose to oppose him, I can choose to dismiss him, or I can choose to surrender to him as the king of my life. And I suppose the reason why it's so hard to surrender to him as my king is because it conjures up all these responses of obedience or dependence or honor or self-sacrifice. And just the idea of surrender goes against everything inside of us because we so much want to be in charge of our own lives. And now the thing is, there's a throne set up in everybody's life, every one of us. And someone or something is actually sitting on that throne. And every one of us has a ruler to surrender to it. Every one of us has a throne in our lives. And someone or something is sitting on each and every one of our thrones. And you have a throne in your life. And someone or something is sitting on that throne. And so let me just ask you, who makes the decisions in your life? And who decides what you do? Who decides what fuels your passion? And I just need to tell you, someone or something is sitting on your throne in your life, and every one of us has a ruler that we surrender to. And maybe for you, it could be that your life is ruled by just being successful with your career, and it's your career that's actually sitting on the throne of your life. Or maybe you're ruled by the desire for just gaining acceptance in your relationships with others, and so other people are ruling your life, or the approval of others and how many likes you actually get on social media is ruling your life. Or maybe it's the pursuit of just more money in your life that rules your life. Or maybe it's experiencing just as much pleasure as you possibly can experience. And your life could be ruled by an addiction, maybe bitterness or unforgiveness or anger. I mean, something or someone is sitting on the throne of your life. We all surrender to a ruler, and someone or something is ruling each of our lives. And if you think nothing is ruling your life, then maybe pride is ruling your life, because something is ruling each and every one of our lives. And here's the tragedy. The tragedy is that when we allow someone or something else other than Jesus to sit on the throne of our lives, then inevitably it leads to heartache, and it leads to regret, it leads to emptiness and just kind of self-destruction. And you know that. You've experienced that in your life. I mean, do you realize so much of the chaos that you face in your life and so many of the challenges that you just can't seem to overcome in your life, they stem from the fact that possibly you have not or you will not surrender and allow Jesus to sit on the throne of your life. And now it's true for a lot of us, even those of us that consider ourselves to be followers of Jesus. What's true for a lot of us is that we don't mind Jesus carrying around the title of king. We like to sing about him being king. And we like to hear people talk about him being king as long as he's not trying to tell us what to do. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. Oh yeah, Jesus, you're my king. Oh, but I'm going to take a pass on this. And now here's the thing. For those of us that choose to actually surrender the throne of our lives to Jesus, not only did Jesus come to make it possible so that those of us who are imperfect can actually live life to its fullest, but Jesus also made it possible so that those of us who are less than perfect can actually become sons and daughters of God. Now, around our house, Ruth and I in our house, we have lots of signs. For instance, one sign, actually I walked around this week and took pictures of all the signs. One sign says, "It is what it is." Another sign says, "If you see someone without a smile, give them yours." I mean, we have lots and lots of signs at our house, and I try to figure out why we have so many signs. And I think it's because Ruth kind of knows that unless I have reminders of how I'm supposed to act, I may not act exactly right when I'm at home. And as a matter of fact, our house, I mean, you've seen the Progressive Insurance commercial, the one where they're throwing signs in the trash can, the one with a sign that says, "No fussing, no cussing." I mean, that could be our house. And Ruth's favorite sign in our home, though, and probably mine too, actually says, "The King of Kings calls me his own." And that's an amazing thought. That's an incredible reminder that in spite of all of my messes, in spite of all of my bad attitudes, in spite of my stubbornness, in spite of all the things that I do that are so much less than perfect, the King of Kings actually calls me his own. And that's amazing. And that's possible, and it's available for you too. If you choose to surrender your throne to Jesus, then the King of Kings also calls you his own. And so let me ask you, and I want you to be honest with yourself in this answer. Is there a longing in your heart for something more in life? Does it feel like you just can't seem to get things right? Does it seem like you just can't quite get it all together in your life? And if that's true for you, the good news for you is that Easter is all about a king who's reaching out to those who just can't seem to get it right and can't seem to quite pull it together. And he's reaching out to you. And Easter's all about this king who's reaching out to those who are financially in a mess, and to those he's reaching out whose marriages didn't quite work out. And Jesus, the King of Kings, is reaching out to those who use and abuse substances in order to just get by. And Jesus, the King of Kings, is reaching out to those who are trying to find meaning in all the wrong places. And Jesus is actually reaching out to anyone who goes to bed just longing for something more than the loneliness and hurt and emptiness that they're experiencing and feeling inside in that moment. See, there is a throne set up in everyone's life, and someone or something is sitting on that throne, and every one of us has a ruler that we do surrender to now. And Easter is all about making the choice to allow Jesus to be the king that sits on the throne of your life. And so maybe for you, you've never considered it before. Maybe for you, the idea of making Jesus the choice as the king of your life, choosing to surrender to Jesus to be the king. Maybe that's something for you never thought of before. If you were to do it, it'd be the very first time, and I would say that's a great way to go. And the way you do that is you just tell him in your head and your heart, you just say, Jesus, I surrender my life to you. I'm tired of the chaos, and I'm tired of coming up short. And so, Jesus, I surrender my life and the throne of my life to you. And you can do that right now. Or for others, you surrendered to Jesus a long time ago, but somewhere along the way, you actually pushed Jesus off the throne in your life, and you've allowed something or someone else to take his place. And if that's you, then remember, Easter is all about choosing to allow Jesus to sit on the throne of your life. And so why don't you just tell him right now, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for removing you from my throne, but Jesus, today, I want to surrender my life back to you. I can't do this on my own. It's not working like I thought. So Jesus, please take your rightful place back on the throne of my life. Easter is all about the fact that there is a king who can change your life if you'll choose to allow him to take his rightful place on the throne of your life. Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, whose name is above all other names, Jesus Christ, the one for which there is no higher name. So I want you to meet Jimmy. Jimmy, for most of his life, Jimmy actually chose something other than Jesus to sit on the throne of his life. To hear Jimmy actually describe it was a pursuit of fame that seemed to sit on his throne. It was pursuit of pleasure. It was anything but Jesus that was sitting on the throne of his life. But his life kept coming up short. Even though he was doing everything that he could think of to live life to its fullest, he wasn't experiencing life to its fullest. And finally, Jimmy broke down and he cried out to God. And when he cried out to God, right about the same time, Jimmy was invited to LCBC's Hazleton location. So he shows up to that location. He's scared to death of being judged and rejected and feeling so much like a failure. And he showed up to church anyway, and in church he heard the words of a song that we often would sing, and the song was actually So Will I. It's a song that actually would change Jimmy's life. And it was actually just one phrase of this one song that changed Jimmy's life. And this one phrase of this one song actually included a promise of what happens when Jesus sits on the throne in our lives. And this one phrase that actually changed Jimmy's life, this promise of what happens when Jesus sits on the throne of his life, the phrase talks about 100 billion failures disappearing. 100 billion failures disappearing. And Jimmy said, that was me. He said, the number of failures that I'd experienced in my life is unimaginable. And so in that moment, Jimmy surrendered the throne of his life to Jesus, and he said 100 billion just blunders and mistakes and sins and tragedies in his life, they just disappeared. And I had the privilege of meeting Jimmy a couple of years back, and I actually want you to meet him too. And so I want you to listen to Jimmy's story, and as you listen to Jimmy's story, where does his life intersect your life? Where is your story similar to his story? Listen to Jimmy's story.
Wow, it's nice in here. Yeah, my favorite barista.
Hey guys.
There she is. Just getting to where I am now. So Jimmy, I've loved getting to know you over these past couple of years and getting to connect from coming to LCBC and coming to get involved with our worship team. And it's been so fun getting to not only hear some of your story, but to then get to see it unfold and see some of the things that you've experienced, some of the things that God's done in your life and through your life.
I started music at an early age. I played various instruments. I found drums when I was about 15, and then I just got hooked on it and envisioned that I would be, getting to play semi-professionally up on stage. That was my main objective always, was just touring and playing drums and music.
I remember we connected over that initially, because I was around the same age when I started playing drums and got real excited about it.
I had that super drive, motivation to do it. That's all I wanted to do, without really knowing what it's all involved, behind the scenes kind of. And I kind of learned that as I was in it for a while. with metal, it's all, the lyrics are all dark and stuff like that. And it wasn't really what I thought it was. And it kind of got to me after a while, especially with like the fame. Once you start going down the road of like fame, internet fame, it's like an endorphin rush, and you just get like, Instagram followers, likes, people messaging you, giving you compliments. And then you start viewing yourself as like sitting on a throne, like high up, because you're every night playing packed shows, people coming out just crazy, screaming your name, screaming the band's name. I was so sucked into social media for so long. I was so addicted to it. My parents, my family, my brother, all the time they'd be like, "Oh, you're always on your phone. Get off your phone." Like, and I couldn't. I was so into it, because for me, like, that was my God. I felt that was my purpose of what kept me alive and kept me excited every day. And if that would go away, then it's like, who are you? Being around people that don't really have any direction, any morals, no repercussion. They don't have God in their life. They just have the mentality of like, there is no God, so I'm going to live life the way I want. And I don't care who I hurt. I don't care what I do. I serve myself, and all I care about is myself. Just seeing how they treat women, how they treat others, just, drugs, alcohol. And I needed to see that firsthand to really want to change my life. Because if someone would have told me, don't do this because this isn't good or this, that, I'd be like, oh, what do you know? I had to really find that out for myself and go down that road on my own to realize I don't want this anymore, and I want to do something to change my life and change my heart. I knew that I was going to be done after that. I knew we were going to do an album, and I knew like as soon as I was done with the album, like I was going to call it quits, and I ended up leaving the band. And after I left the band, I felt like my purpose in life was over now. I just felt like empty, like a hollow shell. All those thoughts kind of and feelings kind of like flooded me. I started crying, like wept bitterly, and I didn't know what else to do, but I just prayed to God that I needed help.
And so then you responded in those moments to a, yes, I'm gonna go check out this church. So what made you come to LCBC? And the person who invited you was our friend Steven.
He would cut my hair. So sometimes, he would say like, hey, he'd bring up like church, that he goes and plays at this church that he plays drums at. And I was like, what kind of church do you go to? You play drums? Like I thought that was really cool. I sat in my car and I was wearing a tank top. I was like, I'm gonna go home, I'm not doing this. And I went in and everyone was super welcome, and they're like, hey, nice tattoos. And I was so blown away by it. I was like, these people they're not like judgy, like they're accepting.
Yeah, I remember talking with you in the atrium there, and you're like, hey, I just feel like I need to get plugged in. Would I ever be able to play drums here?
Yeah.
And I'm like, absolutely.
When I first heard So Will I, it was like my heart was so closed up and I had so many walls built up, and I felt like it was just God plowing right through. That song just like wrecked me, man. Like I felt something inside just changed my heart. And that line, 100 billion failures disappear as you speak, dude, that just like touched me so much, man. Like just because I felt like my whole life I was a failure, like I made all these wrong decisions, and I felt like God would be so ashamed of me. I was like, if I were God, I would just shake my head at me and just be like, you're a mess. I gave you all these things and you just did everything wrong. And that's how I felt about myself. Hearing that song, I felt like God was trying to use music, which was my number one thing, music, to try and, speak to me. As you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. I went back and I listened to that part like so many times because it made me feel something so powerful. And it made me realize, Jesus died on the cross for our sins. Like it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not be perfect. No one's perfect. Jesus realizes that. And he says, it's okay, I love you. I love you anyway. Like, it's fine. Like, this is why I made you. Like, I made you this way and I love you the way you are. This is the purpose I was looking for. And it just broke down those walls, and it just made me cry so hard. It made me feel alive, and it was exactly what I needed. And after that moment was when I was like, I'm going to make this a priority in my life. God, he let me go free and go do my thing, but then he pulled me back in. And it's just really cool to know that like he was watching the whole time. I always felt like God forgot about me, and I wasn't welcome in church and that, but the whole time he was my #1 fan.
That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah, it made me humble myself, and instead of doing everything to serve myself, it's like I want to serve God and be a follower. I'm living proof that God exists, and he doesn't give up on anyone. I'm Jimmy, and I'm a life changed by Christ.
So Easter is all about a king. A king that came to change our lives. And Easter is all about you, and Easter is all about me, because Easter is about you and me and choosing to surrender the throne to Jesus so that we can experience life his way, so that we can experience life in all of its fullness. And I say today's the day to make the choice to surrender. And if you do, I say you will not regret it. Next week, we actually begin to take a look at some of the statements that Jesus made as he tells us how we go about living life and doing it well. And so I would just invite you, plan to be with us next weekend, and I hope you know that you're always welcome here with us. Today, if you'd like to talk or pray with someone about surrendering your life to Jesus, or talk or pray about really anything that's going on in your life right now, if you're joining us online, then the chat on the screen will remain open for the next 10 minutes or so. So stick around, let us know how we can be praying for you. Or you can go to the LCBC website at any time throughout the week and click on the prayer button. Let us know how we can be praying for you. Or if you happen to be in one of our 15 LCBC locations, there will be people down in the front left corner of your room at the end of this gathering. So make your way down front. There are people that would love to meet you and to pray with you. LCBC, can I just say today and this week, may the Lord bless and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Thanks for being here. Happy Easter. We'll see you next weekend.